The strange shop the night on the space station was never truly dark. Neon lights glowed in every corner, and strange alien signs flickered in colors no human language could name. Ethan, a human traveler, walked slowly through the crowded market street, his eyes wide with curiosity. He had seen many worlds before, but this marketplace felt different, older, and full of secrets waiting to be discovered. The air was thick with alien spices, the smell of burning oils, and the faint sound of mechanical wings buzzing overhead. Merchants shouted in dozens of languages, offering weapons, jewels, and relics of forgotten empires. Some creatures looked almost human, while others had shapes so strange they seemed born from a dream. Or maybe a nightmare. Ethan felt like a small piece of dust in a giant universe, yet something kept pulling him deeper into the maze of shops. At the far end of the street, he noticed a narrow alley that most people avoided. The signs above it were old, faded, and written in symbols that glowed faintly in green. Something about it called to him, like a whisper in his mind, urging him to step closer. Ethan hesitated for a moment, then shrugged and walked in, his footsteps echoing in the quiet passage. At the end of the alley stood a small shop, almost hidden between two massive towers. Its windows were covered with dust, and strange artifacts were displayed behind the glass. A tall sign above the door carried words in alien script, shifting and changing shapes as if alive. When Ethan stared at it too long, the letters rearranged themselves into English, spelling out one word: mystery. Ethan pushed the door open, and a bell chimed with a sound that didn't seem natural. The inside of the shop was dimly lit, with shelves stacked high with objects both beautiful and terrifying. There were glowing orbs floating inside crystal jars, weapons that hummed softly as if dreaming, and books that turned their own pages. Every step Ethan took made the floor creak, though it felt less like wood and more like the shop itself was breathing. Behind the counter stood the shopkeeper. He was an alien unlike any Ethan had seen before, tall and thin, with skin the color of rusted metal and eyes that glowed faintly yellow. His long fingers tapped against the wooden counter as if he had been waiting. "Human traveler," the shopkeeper said in a deep, echoing voice. "You've come far, and you've come for something you do not yet know." Ethan blinked in surprise. "I was just looking around," he replied quickly, though even to his own ears it sounded weak. The shopkeeper gave a small, knowing smile. "No one enters this place by accident," he said, gesturing toward the shelves. "Here you will not find what you want, but what you need." Ethan glanced around, unsure what to say. His eyes scanned the shelves until they landed on an old, dust-covered box sitting alone on a pedestal in the corner. It was small, no larger than a suitcase, made of some kind of dark metal that shimmered faintly when the light touched it. Strange glowing lines ran across its surface, forming patterns that looked almost like veins, alive and pulsing. "What's in the box?" Ethan asked, stepping closer. The shopkeeper's yellow eyes narrowed slightly, and his voice dropped lower. "That is not a thing to be opened lightly, human. For what rests inside has been hidden for centuries, sealed away with blood and oath." He leaned forward, his shadow stretching across the floor. "To open it is to accept a fate that cannot be undone." Ethan felt his heart beat faster, yet his curiosity only grew. He had always been drawn to the unknown, to the forbidden. Something deep inside told him that this box was waiting for him, that somehow it had always been meant for him. "How much?" he asked, trying to sound casual, though his voice shook a little. The shopkeeper studied him for a long moment before naming a price. It was high, higher than Ethan expected, but still within reach, almost as if the alien wanted him to take it. With a sigh, Ethan handed over his credits, and the shopkeeper carefully slid the box toward him. The moment Ethan touched it, a strange warmth spread through his hands. The lines on the box glowed brighter for a second, pulsing like a heartbeat. The shopkeeper gave a slow nod. "It has chosen you," he said quietly. "What happens now is beyond my power." Ethan swallowed hard, lifting the box into his arms. feeling its weight press down on him like more than just metal as he turned to leave. The shopkeeper called after him, "Remember, human, some mysteries are doors, and once opened, they can never be closed again." The bell chimed once more as Ethan stepped out into the neon night. The box heavy in his hands, he felt the marketplace around him, but his thoughts were only on what lay inside, whatever secrets the box carried. They were now his, and somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered to him that his life would never be the same again. The box opens. Ethan carried the mystery box back to his small rented room on the space station. The corridors outside were loud and alive, but inside his quarters, silence pressed down like heavy air. He set the box on the metal table, staring at it for a long time without moving. The glowing lines across its surface pulsed softly. Like a sleeping heart, waiting, he rubbed his hands together, unsure if he was excited or afraid. The shopkeeper's warning echoed in his mind. To open it is to accept a fate that cannot be undone. But curiosity burned brighter than fear, and Ethan had never been the kind of man to walk away from a locked door. He fetched a small toolkit and ran his fingers over the strange markings, wondering where to begin. When his tool touched the surface, the box reacted instantly. A faint hum filled the room, and the glowing veins spread wider, crawling across the table like living light. Startled, Ethan pulled back. But the box seemed to respond to his presence, not his tools. He leaned closer and pressed his palm against the surface. The moment his skin made contact, warmth spread into his body. The lines blazed brighter, symbols rearranging themselves in patterns he could almost understand. It was like the box was reading him, testing him, and deciding whether he was worthy. Ethan's breath quickened, his hand trembling, but he did not let go. With a loud click, the seal broke, and the top of the box slid open with a hiss of cold air. Fog spilled out across the room, and a faint glow lit up the space. Inside was not treasure, not weapons, not relics, but something Ethan never imagined. A pod, sleek and transparent, with frost clinging to the glass. Ethan stepped closer, his heart racing, and then he saw her, a girl, lying motionless inside the pod. Her skin pale and marked with glowing lines that matched the box itself. Her long silver hair floated around her like threads of light, and her eyes, still closed, shimmered faintly beneath the lids. For a moment, Ethan could not move. She was beautiful, but not in the way of human beauty. There was something otherworldly about her, something that whispered of ancient power and endless stars. It was like staring at a dream shaped into flesh. Fragile yet overwhelming. His first thought was that she might be dead. His second thought terrified him more. What if she was alive and dangerous? He placed a shaking hand against the glass, and to his shock, the markings on her skin glowed brighter in response. The pod's systems whirred, releasing another hiss of air. The girl stirred, her fingers twitching, her lips parting as if to breathe. The glow spread across her body, and suddenly, her eyes snapped open. They were not like human eyes. They burned with a soft golden light. Like two small suns, Ethan stumbled back, his chair clattering to the small sun's floor. For a long second, they stared at each other, human and alien, stranger and stranger still. The girl pressed her hand against the inside of the pod, her expression full of confusion and fear. She said something in a language Ethan could not understand, her voice melodic but broken with panic. Ethan shook his head, holding up his hands. To show he meant no harm, the pod unlocked with a metallic click, the glass sliding open. Cold air rushed out, and the girl sat up slowly, unsteady as if waking from centuries of sleep. Her glowing eyes darted around the room before landing on Ethan again. She whispered words, soft but desperate, and though he couldn't understand, he knew she was asking for help. Ethan stepped forward carefully, his voice calm. "It's okay. You're safe here," he said, even though neither of them truly knew if that was true. The girl tilted her head, repeating the word safe, as if trying to learn. Her intelligence was sharp, her mind adapting quickly, even in her weakened state. Suddenly, the lights in the room flickered, The machines buzzed, screens scrambled with static, and the air grew heavy. The energy was coming from her, uncontrolled, spilling into everything around her like a storm of power. Ethan grabbed her shoulders gently, trying to steady her. "It's all right. Calm down," he said, his voice steady, though his heart raced. Slowly, the energy faded, and the room grew quiet again. The girl collapsed against him, exhausted, her glowing eyes dimming. Ethan held her, realizing this was no ordinary discovery. This girl was something forbidden, something priceless, and very likely something hunted. As he laid her carefully on the bed, Ethan knew one thing for certain. This was not just a mystery box. This was the beginning of something far larger, far more dangerous than anything he had ever faced, and though he did not know who she was, or why she had been hidden, he could feel deep in his bones that his life had already changed forever. The first contact, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the pod cooling down. Ethan stood frozen, watching the alien girl breathing softly on the bed. Her silver hair spread across the sheets like threads of moonlight. He could still feel the warmth of her body against his chest from when she had collapsed. She looked fragile now, but he could not forget the sudden storm of energy that had nearly torn the room apart. For a long while he simply sat on the edge of the bed, unsure of what to do. This was no artifact, no machine, no treasure. This was life, hidden inside a mystery box, life with a mind, a soul, and power. And Ethan, a simple human traveler, had unleashed her. The girl stirred again, her glowing eyes opening slowly. She looked at him with confusion, as if trying to decide if he was friend or enemy. When she spoke, her voice was soft but carried a strange resonance, like two tones layered together. Ethan could not understand a single word, but he felt the weight of her meaning press into his chest. "I don't understand," he said nervously, raising his hands to show peace. She blinked, tilting her head, then repeated his last word, "Understand." Her voice broken but sharp. Ethan leaned forward, realizing she was learning quickly, repeating and testing his language. Her intelligence was clear, but there was still fear in her eyes. He grabbed a water flask from the table and offered it to her. The girl hesitated, staring at the flask as though it was alien to her, which in truth it was. She touched it cautiously, her fingers glowing faintly where they brushed the metal. Then she brought it to her lips, taking a sip, and for the first time, a small spark of relief flickered in her golden eyes. "Water," Ethan said, tapping the flask. She paused, then repeated, "Water," her voice soft but clear. The word carried across the room like the first stone placed on a bridge between two worlds. Ethan smiled, though his heart still beat wildly. As she tried to sit up, her body trembled, and Ethan moved to help her. But when his hand touched her arm, he felt a sudden jolt of energy flash through him. It wasn't pain, but it was powerful, like standing too close to a thunderstorm. For a moment his vision blurred, and he saw flashes, stars, fire, and a city of towers collapsing under alien warships. He gasped, pulling back, his chest tight. The girl looked at him with wide eyes, realizing what had happened. She spoke quickly in her own tongue, words spilling like rivers, but he could not follow. All he knew was that when he touched her, he had seen pieces of her memory, maybe even her destiny, before he could ask anything. A sharp sound broke the silence. Metal creaked outside his door. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor. Ethan froze, his instincts screaming that they were no longer alone. The girl's glowing eyes narrowed, and she whispered a single word in broken human speech. "Hunters." The word chilled him. He hadn't told her that anyone was coming, yet she knew. As if she could sense them through walls and metal, Ethan moved quickly, locking the door and dimming the lights. The girl grabbed his sleeve, her strength surprising despite her weakness, and pointed at the box. The pod inside was no longer glowing, it was collapsing, folding in on itself until it was nothing more than an empty shell. The evidence of her existence was disappearing, almost as if it was designed to hide her once. She awakened. Ethan realized then she had not been hidden as a treasure. but as a secret worth killing for. And now, because he had opened the box, the secret was out. The footsteps grew louder, voices speaking in a guttural alien tongue just outside his door. The girl pressed closer to him, her breathing fast, her golden eyes burning with fear. Ethan had no weapon, no plan, no reason to fight, yet something inside him stirred. The same stubborn will that had made him open the box in the first place. He looked at her and whispered, "I'll protect you." She tilted her head again, repeating softly, "Protect," as though memorizing the word. For the first time, trust flickered in her eyes, fragile but real. The pounding on the door began, shaking the walls, and Ethan realized the moment of choice had come. The girl closed her eyes, her body glowing faintly again. She raised her trembling hands, and suddenly the air in the room grew heavy. The lights flickered once more, shadows twisting along the walls. It was not just fear she carried inside her, was power, raw and untamed, a storm waiting to break. Ethan clenched his fists, standing between her and the door as the metal frame began to bend under the assault. He didn't know who these hunters were or why they wanted her, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The moment he opened that box, he had stepped into something greater than himself. And now, for better or worse, he was part of her. "Fight!" The door shuddered again, cracks spreading across the lock. The girl whispered another word, barely audible, but one Ethan would never forget. "Together," she said, her golden eyes meeting his, glowing brighter than ever. And in that instant, Ethan understood that the first contact between human and alien had already been made, not with words, but with a choice. The hunters. The metal door shook again, sparks flying from the lock as something heavy slammed against it. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, his heart pounding. The alien girl clutching his sleeve, her golden eyes glowing brighter in the dark. The air felt charged, like the seconds before a lightning strike. He knew that whoever or whatever was outside was not coming to talk. The lock gave way with a sharp crack, the door swinging open as shadows poured into the room. 3 figures stepped inside, tall and armored, their faces hidden behind dark helmets, glowing red visors scanning the room. They moved with precision, like hunters who had tracked prey many times before. Their weapons hummed with energy, casting faint blue light across the walls. The girl whispered again, her voice trembling but clear. "Hunters." Ethan's throat went dry, but he forced himself to stand firm. "What do you want?" he shouted, though he already knew the answer. One of the armored figures stepped forward, his voice metallic and harsh. "Return the subject, human. She is not yours." The girl pressed closer to Ethan, shaking her head, her fingers tightening around his arm. Ethan swallowed hard, his body screaming at him to give her up, to survive. But when he looked into her eyes, he saw fear, pain, and a silent plea that cut deeper than words. For the first time in his life, Ethan realized survival meant nothing if he abandoned her. "I don't think so," he said quietly, his voice steadier than he felt. The hunters raised their weapons, and the room filled with the hum of charging energy. Before the first shot fired, the girl lifted her hand. Her skin glowed, her markings blazing like molten fire, and the air exploded with invisible force. The blast threw the hunters back, their armor sparking as they slammed into the walls. Ethan shielded his face, the shockwave rattling the furniture, the lights flickering violently. The girl fell to her knees, gasping, her body trembling from the effort. Her power was immense, but it was unstable, and Ethan knew she couldn't keep it up for long. The hunters rose again, slower this time but unshaken. One snarled in a language Ethan could not understand, but the intent was clear. This was no rescue mission, it was a capture or kill. Ethan grabbed the closest thing he could find, a metal rod from his broken chair, and stood in front of the girl. It was a pathetic weapon compared to theirs, but it was all he had. The hunters advanced again, their steps heavy, weapons glowing brighter. Ethan's grip tightened, sweat dripping down his face. He had no plan, no chance, but his legs refused to move away, for reasons he couldn't explain. He would rather die here than step aside. The girl touched his arm again, whispering one word in broken human speech. "Run!" Her voice cracked, her body too weak, but her eyes burned with determination. Ethan shook his head, whispering back, "Together." The hunters raised their weapons once more. Then suddenly, the alarm systems of the building blared, red lights flashing across the walls. Somebody outside had triggered the station's emergency alert, and the hunters hesitated. That hesitation was enough. Ethan grabbed the girl, pulling her toward the back of the room, where a narrow maintenance hatch led into the service tunnels. The hatch groaned as he forced it open, pushing her through first. Blaster fire erupted behind them, scorching the walls and filling the air with the smell of burning metal. Ethan dove in after her, sealing the hatch just as another shot cracked against it. The tunnel was narrow, dark, and full of pipes hissing with steam. But at least they were alive. They crawled quickly, the girls breathing heavy, Ethan's mind racing. Behind them, the hunters' weapons pounded against the hatch, their voices echoing through the tunnel. "They won't stop," Ethan muttered, his voice low. "They'll chase us to the ends of this station." The girl nodded weakly, whispering, "Always." Ethan's chest tightened, realizing this was no simple escape. These hunters were part of something larger, something powerful. Whoever had sent them would not rest until she was back in their hands, or until she was dead. And now, because of one choice in a strange shop, Ethan was tangled in her war. They reached a junction, the tunnel splitting in 3 directions. Ethan stopped, listening to the faint sounds of boots and weapons echoing above. He chose the left passage, guiding her quickly. Every second felt borrowed, every breath a reminder that death was just a step behind. Finally, the tunnel opened into a vast underground hangar, dimly lit and filled with abandoned cargo crates. Ships long forgotten rested like broken bones, their metal frames covered in dust. Ethan pulled her behind one of the crates, both of them gasping for air. For the first time since opening the box, he allowed himself a moment to breathe. The girl leaned against him, her golden eyes dim but still glowing faintly. "Why? Help?" she asked in halting words, her voice weak. Ethan looked at her, and for a moment he had no answer. Then he smiled grimly and said, "Because humans don't abandon each other." The sound of footsteps echoed again in the hangar, the hunters spreading out, their red visors cutting through the darkness. Ethan's heart sank, realizing the fight was far from over. But when he looked at her again, fragile and yet so full of hidden fire, he knew one thing: the hunters might have the weapons, the training, and the numbers. But he had something they would never understand: a human's stubborn will to fight when all odds said surrender. And that, he thought, was only the beginning. The escape. The hangar was silent, but not for long. Ethan crouched behind the crate, his heart pounding so hard he thought the hunters would hear it. The alien girl leaned against him, her breathing uneven, her golden eyes dim but still glowing faintly in the dark. Around them, the sound of heavy boots echoed, the hunters spreading out across the hangar floor like wolves closing in on prey. Ethan scanned the rows of old cargo ships, most of them rusted, broken, or stripped for parts. But one small freighter near the far wall looked intact, its hull dusty but sealed, its landing gear still steady. It wasn't much, but it was their only chance. He nudged the girl gently, pointing at it, and she gave a weak nod of understanding. They moved quietly from cover to cover, crouching behind crates and old machinery. The hunters' red visors cut through the shadows, sweeping across the floor like searchlights. Twice, Ethan froze as beams of light came dangerously close. Each time, the girl pressed closer to him, her touch warm, her fear clear, yet her trust unshaken. Halfway across the hangar, one of the hunters turned suddenly, his visor locked on their movement, and a sharp metallic growl echoed through his helmet. "Target located," his voice boomed, and the hum of his weapon filled the air. Ethan grabbed the girl's hand and bolted, sprinting toward the freighter as energy blasts scorched the floor. Behind them, the hangar erupted into chaos, weapons firing, sparks flying, crates shattering into pieces. Ethan and the girl zigzagged through the wreckage. The hunters closing in fast, his legs burned, his lungs screamed. But he didn't dare slow down. Beside him, the girl stumbled, her body still weak. But when she fell, he pulled her back up without hesitation. At last, they reached the freighter. Its metal surface cold under Ethan's hands, he slammed his fist against the access panel, praying the old ship still had life left in it. The panel flickered, then died. "Come on, don't do this to me," he muttered. Slamming it again, the girl stepped forward, pressing her glowing hand against the panel. The markings on her skin flared, and the ship's systems roared to life with a low hum. The hatch slid open, lights flickering inside. Ethan blinked in awe, then pulled her inside, slamming the hatch shut just as a blast scorched the door. The cockpit smelled of old grease and dust, but the controls lit up under the girl's touch. She collapsed into the co-pilot's seat, her eyes half closed, drained from using her energy. Ethan dropped into the pilot's chair, staring at the complex alien systems. "All right, ship," he muttered, gripping the controls. "Let's hope you remember how to fly." The hunters pounded against the hatch, their weapons tearing into the hull. The engines coughed once, then roared awake, the deck trembling under their power. Ethan grinned, despite the fear clawing at him. "That's it, come on, we're not done yet." He pulled the lever, and the freighter lifted off the hangar floor, hovering unsteadily at first. The hunters inside fired again, one of their blasts searing through the cockpit window. Ethan ducked, cursing, as sparks rained down. He slammed the throttle forward, and the freighter shot upward, smashing through the hangar doors. The impact sent metal shards raining across the station. Alarms screaming as the ship broke into open space. Stars filled the view ahead, vast and endless. Ethan's chest heaved as he pulled the ship clear of the station, the hunters shrinking behind them. But relief lasted only seconds. On the radar, several red blips appeared, hunter ships launching from the station, fast and armed. "Of course," Ethan muttered, gripping the controls tighter. The girl weakly raised her head, her golden eyes flickering with light. "More," she whispered, pointing at the radar. Ethan nodded grimly. "Yeah, I see them." The freighter rattled as laser fire lit up the darkness, bolts streaking past the hull. Ethan jerked the controls. Weaving through the barrage, the girl pressed her hand against the dashboard, her glow spreading across the controls. The ship responded instantly, faster, sharper, like it had been waiting for her touch all along. Together, they pushed the freighter through the storm, dodging blasts and weaving between hunter ships. One enemy vessel swooped close, firing a barrage that rocked the hull. Ethan swore under his breath, but before he could react, the girl raised her hand. A burst of golden light shot from the freighter, slamming into the hunter ship and sending it spiraling out of control. Ethan gaped, then laughed breathlessly. "Remind me never to make you angry." The girl gave a faint smile, though her body trembled from the effort. She slumped back, whispering another word she had learned. "Together." Ethan glanced at her, his chest tightening, and nodded firmly. "Together." The freighter roared into deeper space, hunter ships still in pursuit. Ethan didn't know where they were going, didn't know what awaited them out there, but he knew one thing for certain. This escape wasn't just about survival anymore. It was the beginning of something far bigger, and for the first time since opening the mystery box, he wasn't afraid. He was ready. The revelation. The freighter drifted through the endless dark, stars scattered like silent watchers across the void. Ethan slumped in the pilot's chair, his hands shaking from the chase, his chest burning with every breath. Behind them, the hunter's signals had faded for now, though he knew it was only temporary. No one sent warriors like that and then gave up. The girl sat quietly in the co-pilot's seat, her silver hair glowing faintly in the dim light. Her golden eyes were half closed, but they never stopped watching the stars. She looked like she belonged out there, as if space itself was her home. And Ethan realized for the first time how small he was compared to the secrets she carried. After a long silence, she spoke, her voice soft, her words broken but growing stronger. Name. Liara, she said, pressing a hand to her chest. Ethan repeated, Liara, tasting the word, letting it settle in his mind. Her lips curved slightly, almost a smile, as she nodded, yes. Liara, he leaned back, exhaling, all right. Liara, I think you owe me a little explanation. She tilted her head, confused at first. Then her expression grew heavy. Her hands glowed faintly as she touched the console. And suddenly the ship's display changed. Stars shifted, forming shapes. Lines of fire drawing patterns across the void. Ethan stared in shock as a vast hologram appeared in front of them. A galaxy burning, planets scarred with war, fleets of alien ships clashing in endless battles. And at the center of it all, a towering structure of black stone floating in space like a fortress. Liara pointed at it, her voice trembling. Empire. The word carried weight, heavy and sharp. Ethan felt his stomach twist as he looked at the fortress, a place that seemed more alive than built. Liara's golden eyes flickered as she spoke. Again, slowly forming the words. They made me, she whispered, pressing her hands against her own chest. Weapon. Not free, Ethan blinked, his throat dry. Weapon? You mean you were built to fight? She nodded slowly, her voice breaking. Born. To obey, to destroy, to end. The hologram shifted, showing armies of soldiers. Ships tearing through worlds, cities crumbling under fire. Then a single glowing figure appeared at the center of it all. It was her. Ethan's chest tightened. His breath stuck in his throat. She was created as the heart of destruction, a living force designed to break civilizations. But her eyes told a different story, not of rage or cruelty, but of pain, fear, and a desperate hunger for freedom. He whispered, almost to himself, They locked you in the box because you escaped. Liara's gaze fell, her voice trembling. I refused. I ran. They hunt me. The word hunt echoed in the silence, heavy with truth. Ethan rubbed his face, trying to process. So that's why the hunters came. They want their weapon back. Her glowing eyes met his sharp and vulnerable all at once. Not weapon, Liara. The simplicity of her words struck him harder than any battle. She was more than what they made her, more than what they wanted her to be. And somehow, she had trusted him, a stranger, a human drifter, to protect her when no one else did. Ethan felt something shift inside him, a spark that was not fear anymore, but responsibility. He leaned forward, his voice low but firm. Then we don't give you back, not to them, not to anyone. Liara blinked, her lips parting as if she couldn't believe what he had said. She whispered the word again, softly, almost reverently. Protect. Her golden eyes shimmered, and for the first time, Ethan saw hope in them. But before the moment could settle, the radar lit up red. Hunter ships reappeared on the scanners, faster, closer, spreading like a net across the stars. Ethan cursed under his breath, gripping the controls. They're not stopping, Liara. They'll keep coming until... He trailed off, unwilling to finish. Liara closed her eyes, her markings glowing brighter, her voice calm but full of pain. They will not stop unless I end. Ethan turned sharply to her, his voice harsh. No, don't say that. There has to be another way. But she only shook her head, whispering, Danger. With me, safe. Without. Ethan slammed his hand against the console, his frustration boiling over. Listen to me, he said fiercely. You are not just some weapon they built. You're a person. And as long as you're with me, you're not alone. Liara opened her eyes, staring at him in silence, the glow reflecting the fire in his words. Slowly she nodded, whispering a single word that shook him more than the hunters ever could. Together. The ship rattled as another blast struck the hull, alarms screaming. Ethan's hands tightened on the controls, his voice steady now. All right then, Liara, together it is. Let's show them what happens when humans fight back. Her hands pressed against the console, her glow spreading across the systems like fire through veins. The freighter's engines roared, stronger, sharper, faster than before. And in the darkness of space, hunted and outnumbered, a human and an alien weapon-turned girl prepared to defy an empire. Asterisk, the choice. The freighter shook violently as another blast slammed into its hull. Alarms screamed. Sparks flew from the panels. Ethan's hands gripped the controls, sweat dripping down his face as he fought to keep the ship steady. Behind them, hunter ships closed in, their red lights cutting through the darkness like hungry predators. There was no outrunning them this time, no hiding, no delaying the fight. Liara sat in the co-pilot's seat, her golden eyes glowing fiercely, her markings burning brighter than ever. The ship responded to her touch, its engines pushing harder, its systems alive as if fueled by her very heartbeat. But Ethan could see the toll it was taking, her body trembling, her breaths shallow. Every time she pushed the ship beyond its limits, she burned herself a little more. The radar lit up with more signals, a fleet surrounding them. At the center of the formation, a massive warship loomed, black and sharp, its surface pulsing like a living thing. Lyra's eyes locked on it, her voice low, broken, but full of dread. Core Empire. Master. Ethan's chest tightened, his throat dry. That ship wasn't just a hunter, it was the heart of the enemy, the one place they could never escape from. And yet, Lyra's gaze didn't leave it, as if she had always known this moment would come. Her lips parted, whispering words Ethan wished he had never heard. I go. I end. You live. Ethan snapped his head toward her, his voice sharp. No, don't say that. But she kept staring at the warship, her golden eyes dimming with sorrow. Only way, she whispered. I give. Myself. They stop. Ethan's hands shook, anger and fear rising like fire in his chest. Listen to me, he said fiercely. You are not theirs. You're not some weapon to hand back. You're Liara, and you're with me. Her eyes softened, her voice trembling. If stay, you die. Ethan gave a bitter laugh, shaking his head. Then we die fighting. That's what humans do. We don't surrender the people we care about. For a long second, silence filled the cockpit, broken only by the ship's alarms and the hum of enemy weapons charging. Liara blinked slowly, her golden eyes shimmering with something new. Tears. She whispered, almost to herself, care, testing the word as though it was the rarest thing she had ever learned. Ethan leaned closer, his voice steady now. Yes, Liara, I care, and that means we fight this together. No matter what. The warship ahead began charging a massive cannon, its glow spreading like a rising sun across the void. One shot from it would end them. Liara placed her hands on the console, her glow spreading across every system, fusing with the ship. Ethan realized what she was doing, and his stomach twisted. She was preparing to burn herself out, to use all of her power in one final blast. Stop, he said quickly, grabbing her hand. You don't have to do this alone. Her golden eyes met his, fierce and unyielding. Together, she said. Ethan hesitated, then nodded firmly, pressing his hand against hers on the console. For a heartbeat, nothing happened, and then the ship roared like a living beast. The freighter shot forward, faster than Ethan thought possible, weaving between enemy ships with impossible speed. Hunter vessels fired, but their blasts missed as Liara bent space itself, twisting their path. The warship loomed closer, its cannon glowing brighter. Ethan gritted his teeth, shouting over the alarms. Now, Liara, do it. She closed her eyes, her entire body glowing, her markings blazing like fire. The freighter's systems screamed as her energy poured into them. Ethan felt the heat on his skin, the power surging through the ship. Through him, together, they unleashed it. A golden wave erupted from the freighter, a storm of light that tore across the fleet. Hunter ships shattered like glass under its force, their weapons silenced, their engines dead. The massive warship trembled, its cannon flickering, its surface cracking as the light consumed it. For one blinding moment, The entire void was filled with fire. When the light faded, silence fell. The fleet was gone, only drifting wreckage remained. Glowing faintly in the endless dark, the freighter floated, its engines dying, its systems sparking weakly. Ethan gasped for air, his hands trembling on the console. He turned to Liara, his chest tight with fear. She lay slumped in her seat, her glow dim, her breathing shallow. Her golden eyes opened weakly, meeting his one last time. "Together," she whispered, her voice fragile but filled with peace. Ethan grabbed her hand, his own voice breaking. "Yes, together, always." Her lips curved in the faintest smile, and her eyes closed. The ship drifted silently into uncharted space, carrying a human who had chosen defiance, and an alien girl who had chosen freedom. The galaxy had lost its weapon, but in its place, something greater was born, a bond that no empire could ever control.